Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, 2024 is upon us. But before we can dive into what's new and what to expect over this next year of horrific monstrosities that await us in film, we need to dive back into 2023 and give you guys our top 10 horror films of 2023. Yes, we did this last year. I think this is pretty standard amongst anybody in the film community who talks YouTube, podcast, whatever. Everybody wants to do a top 10. I mean, it's fun. It's really just a nice kind of walking down memory lane, letting you know just kind of where you spent a lot of your time. And I got to say, like, doing this the last 2 years, doing this properly, God, we've seen way more movies than I think I've have in any standard year before doing the podcast. Like, we've given so many things a chance, like really going back through the channel, looking at all the reviews, going through everything, and just seeing like there's a lot of stuff on this list. Like, we've seen an exuberant amount of films this year. We've had a lot of privilege too.
Absolutely. 2023 in particular has just been such a busy year in terms of, we've really got steeped into getting the screeners and all that stuff. So we've seen just a lot of bigger releases, smaller releases, everything in between. It's one of those things where in preparation for this, I had to go back through the channel just to see every little thing that we've checked out. Because, we do horror stuff. We do a lot of genre things. So there's just so much content, and we talked about 2022 being such a stellar year for horror. 2023 is up there too. There's a lot of great stuff out there, particularly a lot of smaller films. When we tackled Fantastic Fest and just screeners in general, there is a lot of great stuff out there.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's even stuff, speaking of these film festivals that we saw, that I would have really liked to have included, but it just didn't make the cut, didn't come out in 2023. So definitely 2024, there will be some reincorporation of those. I know one of them I made a short for, which was The Origin, which is now Out of Darkness. So it's like that's going to get reincorporated. That's coming out in February. So I hope everybody goes and checks that out. That's going to be, some fresh ground for us to travel. So we'll have to see how that works and what we want to do exactly with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, like it really kept the momentum. 2022 was stellar. I think everybody was saying that was like the year of horror. Like, everybody was so blown away by everything that had come out. The Terrifier 2s, the Pearls, all that stuff. I think that 2023 kept the momentum going. I think that it kind of ushered itself into being more the norm. I think a lot more people started to expect quality horror, especially from stuff that we saw in theaters and things like that. Like, the bar has definitely been raised. We did have some stinkers in there, but if you want to sift through our channel, if you want to ask us personally, we'll tell you. But I don't think there's any need to dwell on them. Don't really dive into the worst of the year lists. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely we're doing both. But I don't think that there's really a need for that when we could just celebrate what we loved, because that's what we tend to do on this channel. We celebrate things we love in the horror space. So with all of that said, I think that it's fair that we kind of preface this just a little bit more by saying, yes, as Luke put it, we do cover a lot of genre fare as well as horror. Now, things like most recently The Iron Claw, although a great film and might possibly be really sitting on it, I've seen it twice now, my favorite film in general of 2023 is just like generalized film. It will not appear on this list. So everything that we review doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a qualifier. This is for the horror fans, the horror-centric community, horror films only on this
Except
list.
for The Flash.
Except for The Flash.
Different horror
yes.
movie, but
yes, definitely we got to get on there with The Flash. But again, before we kick all that off, we're going to dive into our honorable mentions. And with that being said, Luke, I'm going to have you kick it off with your honorable mentions for 2023.
Alrighty, well, I have three. To start with, these aren't in any order, obviously, they're just random. Dark Harvest did not make my list, unfortunately. Again, I was really pleased with this one, being very familiar with the book and then seeing it translated onto film. I was really happy with the take they did. Obviously, there are a couple elements from the book that are missing. But overall, I thought it was really well done. Another one is Malum. That one I was really looking forward to after seeing The Last Shift, and I think that was such an adequate remake, pseudo remake in a sense, where it was a bigger budget and able to kind of really expand on the story. So that one really exciting. I did not get a chance to revisit that, unfortunately, in preparation for the top 10 here. So, that one was really teetering for me. That could easily, again, all this stuff is in flux. You asked me in 2 months, it could easily be in my top 10. And then the last one is certainly a gut punch for me, but just did not. It's more horror adjacent for me. Was Godzilla -1. That one is easily gonna be, if we're just talking top 10 films of the year, easily in my top 10, maybe even my top 5, to be honest, from the storytelling. Just the only reason it didn't make it in was there wasn't a lot of moments of terror. I think there's an opening scene with Godzilla that really works for me, but other than that, it didn't work in terms of horror with what we're gonna see on my actual definitive top 10. But such a great film, a great storytelling, very dramatic piece. But yeah, 3 really strong films just didn't make that top 10 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like to see those films. I think I can second everything you said about them. And there is a few on here that are going to be a little bit of crossover. I think the theme that you're going to see from my list here, and I have 5, is that I'm including at least two or three films. I have to question one because I know you said you were thinking about watching it on here that I know you did not see, or at least to my knowledge, you have not seen yet. But to kick things off, I'm going to start from 5 up to number 1 of the honorable mentions here. And again, it's not really like a particular order thing, it's just how I'm presenting it. But the first one coming out of the gate is going to be Hell House Origins. Yes, this is definitely one that I had a lot of fun with. I really dove deep into the Hell House series this year, just getting to kind of really immerse myself in that universe and see what all the hype was about. I think you'll see like the consistent trend of 2023 for me for a long while, thanks to films like The Outwaters and Skinamarink, was just accepting found footage, really letting it take in as a serious genre, putting aside your paranormal activities, which are fun and stuff like that, but really seeing what the indie offerings have. And I gotta say, the Hell House series is very consistent. I really enjoyed it. Similar to you, I had Dark Harvest on this list. Love Dark Harvest, love the energy. Actually went back, listened to an audiobook of the story. I'm a big fan of it all. I think it's really fun. I do still think that Dark Harvest is going to be one that's going to kind of trickle into my October, late September, throw it on, watch it. It's really good. I hope we get a physical release for it. And then one that I don't think you ended up watching, but I actually had a great time reviewing earlier this spring, was Brooklyn 45. This was really good. This was it was wacky, it was kind of funny, but it still had a lot of those elements of horror in it. And I mean, it's really just a very unique film through and through. And the introduction here, at least for me this year, of the great Jeremy Holm, who I quite enjoyed his performance in this, and a film we'll discuss later on. Then I got to go with one that it does pain me that this kind of fell this far, because this is another one. We still don't have a review up on the channel for it. We should probably rectify that before we post this. But if we haven't, there is no review, but it's Cobweb. And I enjoyed Cobweb a lot. I really do. I just think that if there weren't a few other movies on here that really just going back to them and really thinking it through, just kind of edge their way over it, it's tough. And finally, it goes to Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. I love this movie. I rave about this movie on Twitter. This was so much fun. It is that perfect melding of comedy and horror for me. And still, out of all of them on the list here, Luke, that is still the one I'm going to champion for you to check out if you have not.
Absolutely. I don't know. Sorry. I definitely want to check out Onyx. Honestly, as we record this, there may be a short or something up for my take on that by the time we see this, because that is something that is at the top of my list. I know you've been pestering me a little bit about checking that one out. So I definitely want to see, especially from the special effects standpoint, easily.
Hmm.
Brooklyn 45 is another one that I completely forgot about. I remember you checking that one out, and I just did not get around to it. But that's a Shutter release.
Yes, it was. It is on Shutter. It's still there, available for you to check out.
And of course, we're subscribed to Shutter, so
Hmm.
I'll definitely check that one out. Dark Harvest, yeah, I already shared my thoughts on that easily. One of those ones that's gonna be in the Halloween rotation without question. That is one that I hope we get a physical release with as well. It's just something I need on my shelf.
I think
Um,
that's definitely of a lot of these. That's definitely up there for us as far as podcast potential goes. Just
yes,
because, again, like that review and coming from when we saw that film, like you having the deep steeped knowledge because you had read the story, it was something that you were really into, and then they started talking about making a film adaptation. Like I think that would just make for an excellent show, because it's like, again, I basically did the reverse order of what you did. I saw the film, then got into the story. So I think there's so much there to talk between the book and the film. And I really think it's a solid adaptation. Not perfect, but I think that it's very solid. And you're right, definitely something I plan on watching every Halloween.
yeah, and I mean the elements they did incorporate, I think work really well from a film perspective. Some of the elements they didn't, I understand why they didn't. But that's one, it was slated to come out last year, and
Hmm.
we didn't even see it until it snuck up on us this year. So that's certainly one that I think we could deep dive into, especially if we even look at the production notes and things like that, because there is a lot there to really uncover.
Oh yeah, and honestly, I was surprised to see -1 fall into the honorable mentions, but I knew if it didn't make the top 10, it would be there for you. Just because I know you were very big on that. It was great to get you into Toho Godzilla, and again, we followed that up with in December to Dismember with Shin Godzilla. So you've really gotten to see how the other side lives when it comes to these big kaiju films.
Absolutely, and that's something that I have a hunch that we're maybe discussing this a little bit later down the line here, as we get into the top 10. And I guarantee you, because I am already doing it as we're discussing these honorable mentions, that I will be second guessing myself on that one. But like I said, these are always in flux. So by the end of this video, it could be my top 10. Who knows?
Absolutely. So, without further ado, why don't we hop into our top 10? And we're doing this a little different than last year. It'll probably still be a long video, but we are going to start things off with the bottom five. Alrighty, and here we go with our formal bottom five here for the top 10. No, I did not change t-shirts. We're not recording this on a completely different day. Yeah, whatever. But here, it's going to be a little different. If you guys caught ours from last year, I think it was just more us just kind of shooting the shit, just talking. Trying to structure this one out a little bit. So yeah, we're going to start with the bottom five here. Each of us are going to rattle them off, and then we're just going to kind of go in order as we go along. And as you'll see on the bottom here, I'm going to put some graphics up, a couple of nice little tweaks, so that way everybody knows where it lies on each of our lists, and basically what film we're talking about. So let's hope it goes well. Probably going to stress myself out a bunch in editing, but why don't we kick things off? I will go first with my bottom five here, which is coming in at number 10 for 2023 is Godzilla -1. Yes, just made it on the list there. Coming in at number 9, I have a little film that we got to see really early, and a lot of people are now just starting to get around to seeing, which is Black Mold. I really enjoyed that. And then one we saw at Fantastic Fest, coming in at number 8, is Where the Devil Roams. Following that up at number 7, we have Evil Dead Rise. And then finally, coming in at number 6, we have Suitable Flesh. So yes, lots of good picks there, lots of solid ones. Now I'm going to toss this one over to you, Luke. Luke, give us your bottom five.
Alrighty, well, starting off at number 10 here is Suitable Flesh. And then coming in at number 9 is Where the Devil Roams. And then at my number 8 is Cobweb. And then coming in at number 7, Infinity Pool. And my number 6 is Evil Dead Rise.
Not a bad start at all. Definitely, I'm sure there's a few on here that have clearly made some number ones. I've already seen a lot of people's lists. So let's get things started off here with we're going to have to start with my number 10, which is Godzilla Minus One, which ended up on your honorable mentions. And Luke, you just kind of talked a little bit about it. So I'm going to start things off here again by saying, if you guys don't know already, if you didn't see the review, if you don't know just by the channel's content recently, I'm a big Godzilla fan. I always look forward to a Toho release for Godzilla, and Godzilla Minus One was one that I was very excited about. We reported on it on the Sunday Scaries back when it was just the little icon and the title announcement. And, I was super thrilled when we finally got to sit down and see this. I had heard all the hype. We had been definitely the anticipation, I would say, is building. I got even more excited with knowing that this was going to be the first Toho film that you got to see, and then I got to experience that with you. And I think it delivered. I really think it did. Although I am going to stick to it. I'm going to say that Shin Godzilla, I think, is my preferred version if I had to compare the two. I just like the direction they went with that. This is an extremely well done Godzilla movie with some very fun twists and turns, and I would really like it if they'd expand a little bit on that ending, even though I don't necessarily think that's going to be the direction that the series goes based off of recent comments, but who knows. So yeah, Godzilla Minus One for me comes in at number 10.
Yeah, and going into that one, like I said, I was surprised by it because I didn't really know what to expect. There was a lot of gravitas put into that film in terms of just a very dramatic piece. Like I said, the only reason it didn't crack my number 10 so far was just because it was a little more horror adjacent. So when we were kind of dealing with the horror genre, it just kind of didn't make the cut. But overall, such a complete film. I love the character development in there. I think there were a lot of callbacks to things like Jaws that, when I was sitting in the theater, it's like, oh, that's a lot of fun. It was really well done. It's a creature feature, but it feels more than a creature feature. They really did focus on that story. And I think, I think that really heightens those elements of terror when they're there. And like I said, there is, that introduction to Godzilla when they're on the beach is just one of those. It's the scene that sticks with me the most, I think, out of the film, just because it is so terrifying.
Again, and that's, as a Godzilla fan, the way that they handle that lore is just, I love that. I love having the tiny Godzilla, him being a legend, and then obviously getting bigger as the film goes on. Very cool stuff. I'm really happy that Godzilla Minus One delivered, and that's why it takes my number 10 spot. And coming in at number 9, we have Black Mold, which was definitely a big surprise for us. I know we were looking forward to this, and we had gotten a very early screener. This was just hitting like the festival circuit, and I guess I just tapped on the right door because we ended up speaking to one of the producers, and they sent us a screener before a lot of other critics got to see it. So we thank you guys over there at Raven for making that happen. And yeah, this was definitely a surprise for me. This is a movie that, like this title itself, it just grew on me as time has gone on. I went back and rewatched it in preparation for this. Again, I praised Jeremy Holmes' performance in my honorable mentions with Brooklyn 45. I think he's excellent here as well. I think there's just a lot of really strong ideas in this film, and I think that this definitely is a very, very strong first outing for John Pata, the director, and I'm real eager to see what he does next.
Yeah, and we had heard about it. We covered it on the Sunday Scaries before being able to actually check it out, and very small film. And looking at some of our lists here, I think a lot of smaller horror was a really big shining light in 2023, and Black Mold stands right up there. When you get into those psychological aspects of things, it's my bread and butter. It's something I really enjoy, and just such a more of a confined tale. That one is really exciting, and just from the scenery alone, that is something that I haven't went back and did any research on that film, but I was really curious with a small budgeted film like that. The setting that they used, and how they really did take advantage of it. It is a lot of nice terrifying scenery in a sense. And I really, Jeremy Holm in that film, is his performance is just absolutely top notch, because there is a big moment of tension in that. And I think we talk about it in the review, where there are characters on either side of a door, and they're in this dilemma of, do you trust or distrust? And you start leaning one way, but then you feel like you shouldn't, and then a lot of things spiral out of control. It's a really, I don't want to say fun film, because it's it's very terrifying in a sense, but that is definitely a film where, you know, I would have loved to see things even more expanded upon, because there is some haunting imagery, especially when you get outside, which we did see on this, that we saw prior to actually seeing the film. It was some of the photos that were released, and I think it worked really well. They had some great ideas, and yeah, that's a film I definitely want to go back and revisit, because there is a lot there. And I think, is that streaming now still?
Yes, I
Tubi,
was about to mention it is on Tubi. So it's one of those things where Tubi acquired this, so you can check this thing out on their service. It's actually where I watched this. Then I believe I had tweeted when this had come out. I retweeted our review, and the director reached out and did say there is going to be a Blu-ray at some point down the line. So definitely going to be picking that one up. But you're right, dude. Like the striking imagery, I know. We hinted at it, but it's the scarecrows. That's one of the best scenes in the film. And I mean, I think it's out there, but all I will say is, there is a certain type of critter that pops up in this film that, gets bonus points from the boys on Splattercast. Anytime it shows up, it's not, again, in the way that I think we would have loved, but it is certainly a fun treat for us. And yeah, I really enjoy this movie. It's one that I think is just, really, in my opinion, one of those films that as a first-time director, just like I admire it, because it's like they made this actually, like this has so much more like prowess than just walking around with a video camera and like shaking it up and doing the Paranormal Activity stuff. Like it's crazy.
That was a great idea.
Moving on to number 8. Yes, we are here with Where the Devil Roams, one of the films we got to see at Fantastic Fest. This was definitely something that I was highly anticipating after our buddy Evan reviewed Hellbender, and really got the filmmakers back on my radar. Hellbender was something I'd heard good things about, and I really wanted to check it out, but it just kind of... there was so much time and distance between when I heard about the film and when I actually started really getting into the podcasting scene with this and everything, that I just never went back to it. And yeah, when he reviewed it and had all these wonderful things to say about it, I went back, checked it out, and then we went and saw this at Fantastic Fest just a few weeks later. I was impressed by this. This movie is, as Luke likes to say, the definition of punk rock when it comes to horror. I love the usage of music, and the know that the family producing this, the Addams family, they produced the music themselves as well. There's so many great creative choices here, so many risks taken in this film by making it a period piece and shooting it on such a low budget. I mean, this is just one of those films to me that is, there's a lot of sequences that play in my head entirely, and I gotta say it was probably the fact that we saw this, and it was either right after we watched this or right before we watched Fall of the House of Usher. So, a lot of that Edgar Allan Poe stuff was on my mind. But the concept they use here with the needle, the thread, and the heart, like, I mean, it's just, it is that Edgar Allan Poe Gothic formula. And yeah, I love this movie, man. I think that this is just pure style and in all the best ways.
And I never got a chance to check out Hellbender yet. I went into this one completely cold. I think you prepped me on the Addams Family a little bit before diving into this one. And I'll say there's a very, very striking opening scene here that really sits with you.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go after that scene into another scene that is, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it's black and white. And it's kind of, they're explaining some sort of idea around things. And I think, for me, as soon as all the sequences compiled together, I was absolutely on board with this film. I still didn't know what to expect. I knew this was going to be a period piece, and I was curious to see how they were going to be able to meld, a believable period piece with such a low budget. And I'll say they did it beautifully. And the music that they use really complements, and it's one of those things. In theory, you feel like it shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. And in the music, the choices that they do here really add to a lot of the scenes. And you're going through with this family and this kind of carnival life, I guess you would say, and
Hmm.
the kind of dynamics that are used in there and how everyone kind of gets along. And I absolutely love it. And there's some really graphic violence in here that I think is so well done. I think again, it's something that is you have to walk that line, and sometimes it can be deemed as gratuitous, but they walk that line perfectly, where I think it adds to the element of the film, and I think it's better for that. So this one, like I said, a lot of smaller films are going to be the shining light, I think, in horror in 2023, and Where the Devil Roams is absolutely up there with them.
I agree. Definitely one of the best smaller budgeted films that we got to see. And just like the film we just discussed, Black Mold, this is also a Tubi exclusive. So you can watch both those films. It'd be a great double feature to support indie filmmaking. Two drastically different in style and tone and everything. I mean, I got to say, the Addams Family, they are a genre of their own thus far with their two films.
And the
And
ending on this one,
oh, I mean, it's so impactful. One of those ones that just the imagery is gonna stick with you, and you're gonna be like, "What the fuck?" Like, yeah, dude, I love this one. This is definitely gonna be one that I would like to revisit in like some form of an essay or something later on down the road, because I think there's just so much to be said about this film. But that is going to take up for my number 8 spot, and that was your number 9 spot. So we need to circle back and discuss Luke's number 8.
yes, my number 8 pick, Cobweb, which made it onto your honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that I had heard some rumblings about, but it was really hard to get a hold of at the time. I had a really weird release. I remember checking as soon as it was going to be out in theaters, and honestly, I think for us, the closest was going to be like Columbus or something weird like that. There wasn't any showings that were going to be near us. So this one, as soon as it was available, I jumped on it because I was absolutely excited to see it just from a premise. This is something. This is a script that was, I believe, it's called The Blood List. 2018 wasn't even actually. I don't think it was the winner. It was just in like the top picks and eventually made into a film. I did have a chance to look at the screenplay there. It's a really different styled screenplay as well. So I give the writer props to being able to take that screenplay, actually have someone look at it and actually get a film made of it. But the actual film itself, I think this encompasses, for me, I think Dark Harvest is great, but I think this one really encompasses that Halloween feel for me and what I'm looking for. The dynamics of the family here, I think, are absolutely perfect and unsettling the way that it's played, because, they have this kind of almost humdrum feel to them, but then you start feeling like there's something that they're not being forthright for, and there's more to a story. And there's the concept alone of this voice on the other side of a wall and not really knowing what that looks like or how the story is going to unfold. There was just so much tension here for me. And, you didn't really know exactly how this was going to play out, but when you start getting that feel of how there's a dynamic change in here. And I'll tell you, I did watch this prior to us recording this, and I still get chills during this dynamic change. It's something that, for me, probably in a list of top 10 moments, it's going to be right up there.
Yeah, there's a lot of very solid moments in this. This film for me doesn't stick the landing as well as some of the other ones on my list, which, I still second this. I own the film on Blu-ray. I think that this is an excellent, excellent movie. I agree with Luke here, where I would say, like, this and Dark Harvest are two films for me that will be enjoyed every October, just because they capture that element so well. But I would give the edge to Cobweb here. Just because although Dark Harvest has that very October feel, Dark Harvest very much feels like it's in a dystopia, as this one feels very much like it could be in an Ohio street, you know what I mean? And that's a big deal for us living up here in Northeast Ohio, as we always like to gloat about around that October time. But I mean, really for me, I think the big winners of this film for me are the performances from Lizzie Kaplan and Anthony Starr. I mean, Jesus, both of them. You like them one moment, and then they're just fucking nuts the next, and I love it. I think that it's great. Yeah, I was at one point, this floated around my number 9, number 10 spot. It was just one of those things where I had to be honest with myself, especially I think after rewatching Black Mold, and I probably should have rewatched Cobweb to get it up there, but it was just one of those things where it was like there's that, and then the Godzilla lover in me was like, I gotta include -1. It was a really tough battle for that, but it does come in at number 2 on my honorable mentions. And I will say it was my number 1 honorable mention for a long time, but it was just because I forgot when I was compiling. I somehow lost Onyx in the fray, and I was like, oh no, that's the movie, man. I love that fucking movie. But yeah, no, Cobweb, man, this is an excellent film.
And then coming in at my number 7, which did not appear on your list at all, is Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. This one, it was one of the first films we saw of 2023. Very snowy evening. But going into the theater here, this one, I had been putting off Possessor for such a long time. I had bought that when it first come out, and then had just never fully committed to it. And I sat down and watched that, and it got me a pretty good taste of what Brandon Cronenberg had to offer. And I'll say, I think Infinity Pool lived up to my expectations going into it. I love the mix here. There's a lot of psychological horror as well as actual physical horror that's happening in front of these characters, and I think it blends really well. It's something that I think sometimes it's hard to manage, and sometimes you lean a little too far one way, but I think Cronenberg really is able to balance it throughout, because at one moment, they really put Alexander Skarsgård through the ringer here in terms of, there's when we talk about haunting imagery, there is a ton in here. And this is another one I went back and rewatched. And I got to say, if you haven't seen it in a minute, go back and rewatch it, because there are a lot of things in here that I forgot about. And there's just some wild stuff. I don't want to spoil it, but I'll tell you, Alexander Skarsgård has a fight with himself in here at some point, and it is just an absolute wild scene, especially the ending. But I think Cronenberg also kind of created this almost other world, almost other universe, I think, just because of the terror that, you're out in this more so foreign country, and if you get in trouble with the law, you don't really know what that looks like. And then he blends in this such oddball sci-fi element that really makes you question everything that you're seeing. If it's all real or things have been switched, and you don't know if the dynamic has changed. And then there's an ambiguous ending, I think, where you don't really know. I think it's kind of more so choose your own adventure of what you're getting at. And then, of course, Mia Goth. She puts on performances like nobody's business. And I think, this one, there is a scene where she is on the hood of a car, and Alexander Skarsgård is just being berated. And when you know the dynamic of what they made him believe as opposed to what is the truth, you just can't help but feel bad for the guy. And you had to that's like the start of his gauntlet. So this one for me, when we're talking about some of the best horror films, I think the horror element that Brandon Cronenberg brings to Alexander Skarsgård's character is just absolutely horrific.
Yeah, I really loved Infinity Pool. I struggled not adding this one to my honorable mentions. It wasn't even in the running for me for top 10, and that's not a bad thing. It's just there's a lot of great movies out this year, because I agree with everything you're saying. I did not get a chance to go back and rewatch this one. I've been waiting for the 4K version of it, and I think there's a 4K out now. I know there wasn't when it initially came out on Blu-ray, which is why I held off from buying it. But yeah, I do want to go back and rewatch this one. I thought that of his two films, I definitely prefer Infinity Pool. I thought Possessor was good too, but this was definitely way more of an intriguing concept to me. And I just think the execution as a whole was much wider, much bigger scope
Yeah.
than Possessor was. Possessor had a great concept, but I just feel like it was such a tiny story compared to Infinity Pool, where he felt more confident in telling that story. And I loved it. I thought that all the performances were great. You're correct. Another bang up performance from Mia Goth. I mean, she's just a diamond in everything that she's in. And yeah, it's one of those films that definitely will stick with you. There's a lot of imagery. There's an imagery, but there's some imagery that I'm eager to see. I think it's on the unrated version that they released of Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård by a bush. That's all I'll say. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. I just want to hear. I actually want to see if it gets as intense as people describe, because they said I think they showed that one at, was it Toronto or Sundance last year? I think it was Sundance because it was early in the year. But yeah, no, it was one of those ones for me that just, it's a film. Everything Luke said, yeah, it's intense, it's horrific, it's funny, it's just all that, and I definitely became a much bigger fan of Brandon Cronenberg's work. But yeah, like I said, just a lot of good movies this year. I would definitely have included it in my honorable mentions if I wanted to keep going, but I limited myself to 5 picks. So there you go. So coming in at your number 6 and my number 7, we have Evil Dead Rise. And yes, this was easily, for the longest time, my most anticipated movie of the year. I was really excited for this. I think, like, it's clear now I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. I did the whole timeline video, just a half hour long, of me explaining all my theories, thoughts, and everything. And for that, I had to do a ton of research and really dive into the Evil Dead franchise for about 2-3 months. So yeah, I was pretty excited for this. Like, none to say. Like, I was already excited for it, but like, knowing all the stuff that I knew, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm really excited to see what they do with this. And I think they took a lot of risks. They had a lot of fun. They also serviced the fans like in the best way possible. They didn't beat you over the head with stuff. There were some references that were a little bit more on the nose than others, but I think that they really, just goes to show that the Evil Dead franchise is just one of those unstoppable, consistent horror franchises. It is maybe the most consistent horror franchise of all the big greats. Like, I mean, it's definitely, there's not a single film in there that I can say is a bad movie, including the TV show.
And I think that was, such an anticipated film for the horror community because, I think Evil Dead is the narrative out there is that there is no weak film in the franchise. And, I have to agree with that. And long layover as well. Haven't we saw Evil Dead back in 2013? Is
Yep,
that what it was?
13.
They really take their time with these installments. They're not rushed out yearly. So, you want those quality films. And I got to say, for me, this one definitely did deliver as we were sitting in the theater. I mean, there is a lot of wild things that happen here. Going into, I always go back to the keyhole scene. I think that was so well done. The tension that they bring there, and then mommy's with the maggots now. You see it in the trailer. It's something that's just is probably gonna be one of the most quotable lines of 2023, I think. And then by the time we get to the end of it, I think they brought something very fun and unique to Evil Dead Rise, where we see a pairing of all the family. It's just something that it's a scene stealer for me. It's something that when we talk about Evil Dead Rise, you're not going to get away without talking about it and kind of adding to that lore and, making something a little bit different. So I think Evil Dead Rise had a lot to offer and by no means disappointed me at all. It's one, in a time where legacy horror doesn't really necessarily hit with us a lot of the time. It's been the track record. I think Evil Dead Rise was a big win for us.
I agree, and I think that you're absolutely correct by mentioning the effect it has with legacy horror. Because yeah, we haven't been big fans of the Halloweens, we weren't big fans of Scream, and yeah, this was just one of those ones again that it was a bit nervous. There's a little bit of that. You can't help it when you're so close to a franchise to just kind of go in to say, is this going to be the one that even if it's just good, is it going to derail things? And yeah, I don't think Evil Dead Rise even comes close to derailing it. I've seen it a handful of times. I own it on 4K. The keyhole scene, you're absolutely correct, is one of the most creative uses of a peephole keyhole type deal I've ever seen in film. Like, I mean, it's just like they really commit to that bit and they use it wonderfully. And yeah, Alyssa Sutherland. I mean, she absolutely, like, I feel like that performance is getting forgotten as we get closer to the end of the year, but like she crushed it. And you're right, Mommy's with the Maggots now is easily one of the most quoted lines of the year, and I think will be one of the most quoted lines of the franchise as we go along here. It's going to be right up there with some of Ash's best lines.
And in taking the idea, we really did step out of the box in terms of not being, a cabin in the woods, but still bringing those elements, still holding true to, I think, what an Evil Dead film consists of. And then the world building prior to, the Deadites and everything is the sister dynamic of, in the kids. I think a lot of the acting here was really superb, and just the relationships that we see are not relationships that we necessarily see a lot, and certainly we hadn't seen at the time in the Evil Dead franchise. So I think Lee Cronin really did want to bring something unique and different to the Evil Dead franchise while still maintaining those roots, and I think he did it.
I agree. I agree with you tenfold, and I'm so excited to see what he does next. And to round out the bottom five for us, your number 10 and my number 6. So opposite end of the spectrum here, but had to be included on our list. I know we were super excited about this film, and that is Suitable Flesh. This was one we tried to see at Fantastic Fest. It didn't work out, but thanks to our wonderful PR reps that we work with and the folks over at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival, we did get a chance to see this. And not only that, I got to sit down with both the writer and director for this. And this was one of those films for me that I was really anticipating, but again, was a bit nervous because this is living up to the greats of a Reanimator or a From Beyond. And when you kind of put yourself in that Stuart Gordon's level, like you're trying to sit here and say we're going to continue on the Stuart Gordon universe of Lovecraft, that's tall order. And I really think that Joe Lynch nailed it. I think that he really brought not only the feel of those classic Stuart Gordon films back, but he also was still able to add a little bit of that Joe Lynch charm and fun that he likes to add to his films.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I took away from. I mean, there's some great performance. We'll talk about Heather Graham here in a minute, but looking at it, I think sometimes when you take a film that's kind of has a legacy in a sense, in terms of like Stuart Gordon's legacy, and then trying to replicate it, sometimes it doesn't come off as authentic. But I think Joe Lynch really did kind of bring those Stuart Gordon elements to it, but also put his own unique spin onto it. As I know he did mention it. I know it was mentioned in the press notes, but even prior to reading those, as I was watching the film, it does have that real Basic Instinct feel, and Joe Lynch did say he was inspired by that. And I think looking at that in the hypersexualization, I think in the film really does work. I think there's a means to an end to it, so it's not just gratuitous sex. It's something that is used as a device, and I think melding that in with the relationships and this kind of patient doctor dynamic in a sense really does kind of add to that forbidden fruit almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really fits in that tone of how Stuart Gordon would have told this tale. And just going into the performances here, of course, Barbara Crampton, having her back was just a huge bonus. She always knocks out of the park. And then Judah Lewis and Heather Graham for me really here, she really carried a lot in terms of performance. We really do get to see a great range from her. There are moments where you love her, moments where you absolutely hate her, and there's this wild science fiction element. I think kind of updating and modernizing that the thing on the doorstep and putting your own spin on here. It's something you can enjoy the Lovecraft tale, but also enjoy Joe Lynch's spin on this. It's based off a short story. It's nothing like you're going to see a replication of that short story onto film. It's going to be something unique. It's going to be something different. And, I think the gore that we do get toward the end of it, the film makes you work for it. It's not an all out gore fest, but when Joe Lynch does deliver toward the end, boy, does he deliver.
I agree. And, it's one of those things where maybe that could be a criticism as to people who are expecting that Stuart Gordon-esque style stuff, because he was very consistent about his creatures, his gore, the slime, all that. Like, it's there, but yes, he does take his time to build up to it. And you're right. I love that they use the sex and the the nudity and the sex scenes as a device and not just for gratuitous, hey, we're just putting tits in a movie, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is really the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to have a purpose and you're supposed to move forward with it. And I love the purpose of it. I think that one of the best lines in the film for me is when this entity, this whatever this thing is, is experiencing sex from the female side for the first time. And just that line of "it's better" is just one of those things that sent chills up my spine. That scene, I'm just like, oh my God, the implications of this, of what's going on here, and our characters have no idea. It's just like, it's really, really excellent filmmaking, and it's one of those ones that I am excited and ecstatic to own this on the Blu-ray, and we don't actually have to wait that long. I think it comes out in January, so I'm really looking forward to it. It is on Shudder for you guys to check out. And yes, Barbara Crampton, if you do happen to watch this, well, number one, thank you. But if you're the last piece of my puzzle there, I do want to interview you, and then I will have had Dennis Paoli, Joe Lynch, and her on the show, and that would be just dream come true. And that brings us to the top 5, which we are going to hold off on our number ones. So we're just going to go basically from 5 through 2 at this point. And we'll do it exactly how we did before. We're going to just rattle it all off. So I'll start things off with mine. And kicking things off at number 5 is The Outwaters. Yes, we talked about this film early on. And this was definitely one of those movies that just stuck with us as 2023 went on. This was actually our introduction to Screambox and just getting on their radar. And they basically opened the door for us to review all these wonderful horror films that we got to see this year. And yeah, this one still, in my mind, reigns supreme. Coming in at number 4, I mean, you knew it was going to be on this list. It's Thanksgiving. Yes, Eli Roth's latest addition to the slasher genre was so much fun, so much gory goodness. I absolutely love it, and it's wonderful to have another great holiday horror in the mix that's going to bridge the gap between Halloween and Christmas. And then coming in at number 3 for me, we have Skinamarink. And this is, I know, going to be mad controversial for a lot of people. It seems like this movie's getting a lot of backlash as people are releasing their top 10s. And I think Variety put this one at their number 1. And I was shocked that people were so like, I thought we had gotten over that hump of like people hating on this film. But no, this is one of those movies that is all experience. It's all fear. And it just worked for me seeing it in a tiny little theater. Luke and I'm sure he'll have some things to say about it if it makes it on his list. And yeah, it's one of those movies I will not soon forget. And my number 2, and I know maybe to some of you this might be shocking because I had championed this film for a long time, but my number 2 is Talk to Me. I enjoyed this film. This comes from some people cut from our own cloth here, some YouTubers turned filmmakers that we hope to do one day. And they absolutely killed it. This film, it oozes originality. And I think that it is one of A24's absolute best horror films. It seems like they're getting on this track of at least having one a year where it is just absolutely breaking the mold and exciting. And that was Talk to Me for 2023.
And then I'll just rattle mine off, and then we can get into our thoughts. My number 5, Skinamarink. Number 4, The Outwaters comes in. And then number 3, Eli Roth, Thanksgiving. And my number 2, When Evil Lurks.
Mm, yes, yes. Excellent picks. Excellent picks. So why don't we kind of dive into things here and we will get a little bit more in depth, starting off with Skinamarink, which came in at Luke's number 5 and was my number 3. Yeah, we saw this one. I think this was just after Megan. I want to say this was like the next film. I think the big one that we covered. I don't know if there was any new horror releases in between that, but this was definitely just one of those films that I started to hear the buzz all because it had leaked online and people were talking about it on TikTok and Instagram Reels saying this is the scariest movie of all time and it's going to freak you out. And it was just so weird and so strange looking from just the little material that they showed. And yeah, it was just like, well, I mean, it's playing at the Nightlight. We love that theater. Let's take a stab at it. And yeah, I gotta say, this was a movie that, of course, as I said in my little overview, has just stuck with me. And it has quickly become one of my favorite theatrical experiences. And on a couple of revisits, has definitely remained just as effective as it was that first time go around.
Yeah, and going into that one, I had seen the buzz online, but I didn't, I knew that just like the brief synopsis of it, which is barely anything. It doesn't
Hmm.
really prepare you for the experience in the theater. So I went into this one more, I would say, more cold than you did, because I wasn't privy to, I didn't really pay attention to leaking online, anything like that. I only knew that through your discussion. But when we talk about those favorite experiences in the theater, we always go back to like Terrifier 2 and how much fun that was. I gotta say, probably my favorite experience in the theater for 2023 was going to see Skinamarink. This was at our local art house theater, the Nightlight, and I think that was really the only place locally that was showing it. I don't think any of the big theaters picked this one up.
I think it started to like either the next weekend or a couple days later. I know the Cinemarks got it. It was just after it had that phenomenal first few days. They picked it up like starting that week because I remember the theaters. There wasn't much in the way of horror at the moment. There really wasn't much in theaters at all. So people were kind of just like really eager to check this thing out because of all the word of mouth.
And it was a cold January night, and we went and checked this one out. And I got to say, um, it still remains a very polarizing film for a lot of people. You either absolutely love it or you just hate it. And I think honestly, after the credits were rolling in our theater, I swear we were probably the only two people that enjoyed that film,
Yeah.
just because it is so different. And going into that film and being able to see the camera shots and just how different it was, and never those head-on shots that we're used to when we're seeing characters and we're kind of just seeing feet and carpet and just the wall, and hearing a lot of chatter off screen, and not really, it's lo-fi, it's nothing crisp or anything like that. You really have to lean in and listen. It's a real big attention getter, and I don't think a lot of people were prepared, even being a big horror fan, going into something like that is so unique and so different. But just the way that it was edited together, a lot of people talk about it being that it has that nightmare feel to it, and you can definitely see that with the way it's edited and just kind of the subject matter. There is a lot of terrifying imagery that almost happens off screen. There's one scene, I don't really want to get into it, but it really stuck with me. I think I do touch on it in our review, of just a child, and things are happening. I'm trying to dance around it, but it's stuff that even those scenes that are way different, that are just so unique to that film, and you don't see everything, just giving you that little bit, I think really amplifies that film in terms of creativeness and the point that Kyle Edward Ball is really trying to drive home. Which, again, I love these films that there is no it's more ambiguous. You can kind of take away what you want to from the film, and I think you're better for it. This is a film that really challenges its audience, and I think some people want to shy away from that because they just want to experience that kind of that typical horror that we do see. But Kyle Edward Ball was really adamant about creating something different, something fresh, and I think he really did it here.
I think so too. And, getting into this year, especially really giving found footage more of a shot, it really comes to this film and The Outwaters, which we said is on our list. We're going to be talking about briefly. But it's one of those things where this film, for me especially, has kind of reshaped the way that I can see us presenting horrors on film. And I know there's going to be people in the comments who are going to be ripping us apart for how much we're complimenting this movie. But it truly, as someone who wants to make horrific content, who wants to make horror movies, it really reshaped and revitalized a little bit of how I see certain things, how I can see certain horrors, because this film relies heavily on just the sense of tension building and the sense of audio and the presentation of analog horror, which has just become a much bigger subgenre this year. And I think we're going to see it continue for the next few years as more people are kind of diving down that rabbit hole. And I really think that Skinamarink is hugely in part of crediting that. I mean, like, we have to give them props for really bringing analog horror to the mainstream. And yeah, it's all impressive. We have a really great interview, I say so, with Kyle Edward Ball on the channel. It was one of our first interviews, and yeah, the dude is just seriously one of the kindest people that we could have gotten on the podcast, especially that early on into our interview stage, because like, yeah, he's full of knowledge, full of just love for the genre, and it's really great to pick his brain about how he assembled this film. And yeah, I definitely think that Skinamarink is one of the best. It makes, again, my number 3 and Luke's number 5. But why don't we move on to my number 5 and, of course, your number 4 with The Outwaters.
And, kind of piggybacking off of Skinamarink, where that was such a big viral sensation in a sense, we were kind of given that 1-2 punch, because after we had seen Skinamarink, everyone started talking about The Outwaters and how it's almost a perfect companion piece. And I got to say, me not really being a big fan of found footage films, I wasn't really knowing what to make of this one. We ended up picking up a screener for this one, and I was excited to check it out, but I didn't know if I was really going to love it or not, especially coming off a viewing of Skinamarink. And I gotta say, Robbie Banfitch, this one, when we talk about films that spark creativity, yeah, when we out of all my 10 here, Skinamarink and The Outwaters are 2 that spark creativity. And a little peek behind the curtain. Dylan and I, obviously, we completed a short film, but both these films, in terms of the idea of things that we haven't touched yet, in terms of ideas that we do have, has really taken our approach, and we've kind of implemented those types of films and kind of sparked our creativity to say, yes, we have the typical way to approach these horror films, but what if we take a Skinamarink approach? What if we take the Outwaters approach? And the Outwaters, knowing we have a great interview up on the channel with Robbie Banfitch, and knowing what he used and how he did it, in terms of how long it took him. He used a free moment to run to the desert and do some footage and everything. It was just absolutely inspiring. And I did watch this one in prep for compiling my list, and I gotta say, this one jumped a few spots in my initial list, because the way that this thing's put together, the subject matter, and again, how ambiguous it is toward the end of it.
I agree. Yeah, I think that there's so much energy in this film, as far as just where it starts off as just this, kind of atypical found footage film, and then it builds and builds and really lets its concept breathe in ways that I just was kind of shocked. And again, just like Skinamarink, really revitalized my interest and kind of my acceptance of, found footage. Because like, for a while, I always, give films like Paranormal Activity and stuff a lot of crap for just, being a really creative first film, and then really just kind of spitting out sequel after sequel, and then all the imitations that have come out over the years. But these 2 films, and especially The Outwaters, with it playing it a little bit more traditionally, they really take their concepts and they run with it, and they don't give you all the answers. They leave you with a lot of like you said, ambiguousness towards the end. And it's one of those things where I found myself really polarized by this movie. I loved not only just the production value that was brought from them actually going out to the desert and shooting on things, but just the idea that it was like, this is a creative idea, and I'm not going to let my budget or my lack of resources here hold me back from being able to do it. And I gotta say, there were effects in this that still were just kind of like, wow, like I can't believe like you pulled that off with just like a string and a fishing rod. You know what I mean? Like it's like that just doesn't it just doesn't look like that's what it is, but it is. And it's like I think it just goes to show how impactful the film is and just how well executed it is put together. I mean, the sound design of this movie alone, again, just like Skinamarink, has really emphasizes just how much that element to independent filmmaking can scale your production up. And that's why I think that Outwaters, absolutely, from the moment the credits rolled, I knew this was going to qualify on this list, and I knew it was going to be up there. And same thing with Skinamarink. Again, I know that we're kind of talking about these films in tandem here, but they really were the kind of the sibling films of 2023. So many people have put them on the same pedestal as just like I know there's that fan art that looks like an old movie billing in like a newspaper where it's like the double feature of Skinamarink Outwaters. They would make the perfect double feature if you sit down and watch them. I mean, start with Outwaters and then right about that midnight 1 o'clock in the morning throw Skinamarink on. You'll be terrified. I guarantee it.
And one of my big takeaways from the Outwaters on my second viewing here in preparation for this list was the amount of gore that is actually in the Outwaters. Because, for that one, I always think of it as a found footage and how well done the found footage aspect is. But Robbie really does present a lovely amount of gore in this thing. And there's some haunting imagery. There's a very graphic scene toward the end that is absolutely wild. And then there's a couple other things in terms of effects. There's, this POV shot of this character, almost getting new skin and ripping his skin off, which is absolutely haunting. And then just the usage of it seems basic as I'm going to say it here, but when you actually see it, if you haven't seen this film, a character walking through the desert in the sand, leaving footprints, and then there's this bloody flashlight, and it's just caked in blood, and you get this beautiful close-up shot of it, and it just all works so well. It all gels, and then kind of when we're kind of getting into those abstract aspects of these characters appearing, and you were like, well, how the hell are you out in the desert? It just all works so well. So this one really does stick with me. We did pick up the Vinegar Syndrome copies of it, so I'm eager to deep dive into that and see what else it presents, because Robbie did say he had there is a message there, but he's tight-lipped about it, so I'm really excited to deep dive into that one.
I agree. And we should also shout out that the Outwaters does have two really great compendium short films that go with it. You can see them on the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray as well as they're on Screenbox. So when you watch the Outwaters, make sure you watch those as well. They go right along with the themes of the film. And they're just wonderful. I love both of them. But alrighty, that is going to bring us to my number 4 and your number 3. Which is Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. Coming in late to the game here, just showing up in November, we had Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, which we were very excited about. I mean, we love slashers. It's definitely one of our favorite genres. And I think that we've been really craving kind of, another new slasher icon, because, they kind of come in groups. In a sense, you have your Michaels, your Jasons, your Freddys, all kind of in their own class, and then we have Art the Clown so recently. But other than him, it's kind of tough to say who's really filling that spot. I mean, maybe Victor Crowley gets put in there, but I am absolutely thrilled to be able to say that John Carver, for me at least, has earned his spot there in just one film, because this is pure entertainment. Again, this is great gory holiday fun, and it honestly feels like a film that we should have had decades ago. It really harkens back to those 80s 90s slashers in all the best ways, by not beating your head over, or not beating you over the head with a lot of like the references and things that they do, but they really you can tell there's so much care and so much love put into this film. If you are a horror slasher fan, I mean, this is seriously just like one of the nicest horror comfort food things that I've had in a long time, and I'm eager to get the Blu-ray and check this thing out, because it's like I feel like even when it's not Thanksgiving, I would throw this movie on year round.
Yes, and looking at what we've had in the realm of slashers over the couple of years, where we've had David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy, and then Scream's continuation. It's things where it's more so slashers have more so leaned on the legacy, not necessarily inventing something new. And our displeasure with those, it was something where we were really craving that new slasher, and of course look at our shirts, our love for holiday horror, and kind of really leaning on that holiday of Thanksgiving was something I was absolutely sold on. We talked about the trailer and everything, and my found love for My Bloody Valentine, and how that kind of, harkened back to that feel to it. And, we did have a chance to check out a film that's going to be coming out in 2024 called Founders Day, and we were hoping that was going to be something, a revolving around some sort of holiday, some sort of slasher film that was going to, be a big positive, and it didn't really hit. So then, moving on to Thanksgiving, everything about this one looks so positive. And yeah, anyone can cut together a 2-minute trailer and make a film look great. So, going into this thing, I had really high expectations, but I really didn't know how it was going to turn out. And Dylan said it best, where this is kind of like your comfort food. It's something where this one I knew was going to be in one of my top spots, because probably out of this list, yes, all great films, but Thanksgiving is probably the film that I could easily seeing myself turn on regularly, and coming in and out of writing, being inspired by, because it gives you those 80s feels. And you do that with Friday the 13th, or Halloween and things like that. So I think Thanksgiving is going to definitely pop into that spot of rewatch value. And I'm eager to get that Blu-ray as well, because I know that copy is going to be playing regularly in my house.
And yes, that brings us to number 2, which we do kind of have a little bit of an odd situation here. Last year it worked out great because Luke and I were on the same page. We both picked Barbarian. We both said, hey, that's the best horror film of 2022. This year there's a little bit of a difference, but not by much, because as it turns out, my number 2 is his favorite of the year. His number 2 is my favorite of the year. So without further ado, why don't we reveal our number 1 picks, in which my number 1 is When Evil Lurks. Yes, this was an awesome movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. And Luke, what is your number 1 for all the folks at home?
Of course, it's got to be Talk to Me.
Yes. Now we're gonna just kind of dive right into this. I think, just for the sake of it, we'll just say let's do Talk to Me first, and then we'll just talk about When Evil Lurks last. But let's get into it with seriously, what a tight race this was. Because I mean, for me, these movies flip flop back and forth. I would say that When Evil Lurks was kind of a late addition, even though we did see it as a part of, kind of right after Fantastic Fest. We got hooked up with it. We got to cover it before its release on Shudder. So it's one of those things where it was right around September. But again, I think that only feels that way because we saw Talk to Me in July. So it's one of those things where it's like that film for me was my number 1 for so long. And it by all means deserves to be in that conversation, because it is an endlessly creative concept. I think that was one of the things that you had said to me while we were in the theater watching it, is like you leaned over and you're just like, this concept is just genius.
Yeah, and that's what really caught my eye. And I got to be honest, the trailer came out and didn't necessarily wow me. It looked interesting, but it wasn't something that I felt like was going to be completely original or something we hadn't seen before. But, going to the theater, walking out of theater, I can say I was completely wrong, because, looking at it in the way that it is presented, it's such a unique idea, and it's very fun because both these When Evil Lurks as well as Talk to Me, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of possession films, but I think, both of these films approached it differently and gave it a great unique spin to it because looking at Talk to Me, from the very beginning they present a really strong opening, and then we're introduced to our characters, and I think they present these characters very believable, and it doesn't feel like they're trying. Sometimes when you get into these films, especially when you're dealing with more of a um, modern age group, it feels like there's a 40 or 45-year-old writing for these younger characters. But I think, you lose yourself in that. The social media aspect of it does feel organic, and the usage of it feels natural. And then just the terrifying elements to it. I think there's pretty haunting imagery in this one as well. And then again, a very creative ending to it. I think, I think you do see it coming a little bit as you work toward the ending, but it's completely satisfying, and again opens up the doors. Again, we're getting a Talk to Me sequel, so there's an endless amount in terms of that lore, and they don't handhold you, they don't dissect it in terms of narrowing it down. There's just an offhand comment of they think that the lore behind the hand, and which I absolutely love. There's no hand holding and really over explanations of things. So this one for me really fired on all cylinders, especially being the duo's first outing in terms of a feature length film, and that lean runtime is hour 35 maybe, and you're in, you're out. There's no wasted scenes, anything. It all moves toward that ending and character development. So for me, this one completely worked.
Yeah, and I mean, I second everything you said, except the fact that there is a ton of hand holding in this film, and it's all in the best ways. But I digress. This is definitely one of those movies that, again, just like we said with Skinamarink and the Outwaters, where it's like it just sparks your creativity as a creative. You sit there and you see what the twins here were able to craft, and just how they were able to bring this together. And it just seems so effortless when you watch it. It seems like they should have been making films for years, because like they just expertly piece this thing together. Again, like Luke said, there's no wasted scene. You're watching this thing and you're just waiting for those lulls and those dips to kind of happen. But no, they really knew how to keep this thing nice and tight and brisk, and it creates one of the most rewatchable films of 2023 for sure. And I feel like I pick up just so much from each viewing. And I think on my last viewing of this, I really had to compliment again the sound design and the music, the way that they cut this whole thing together. I love the even just the simplest things, from the opening titles of this film, how it's just kind of off center and it looks a little different. It just really presents itself as something very unique, something wholly different. And I've got to say that, to me, if Skinamarink wasn't out this year, I would say this is the most unique film that I've seen all year. But I mean, it's right up there as far as just the most well written film. I think that this is definitely, from a writing standpoint and a presentation standpoint, one of the strongest outings we've had in 2023. And that's why for me it jostled. I mean, it could have taken number one so easily, but in my heart of hearts, there's only one element that sets When Evil Lurks above it. But yeah, I mean, like, this is just one of those films that, I mean, you're going to see it pop up on a lot more lists, and you're going to probably hear it talked about for many years. And I'm excited for the sequel, even though I don't necessarily think this film needs it, but I'm curious to see where they go with it.
And I think that's the beauty of it, because they didn't dissect that lore. You can keep it open-ended, and you can have, it doesn't need a sequel, but it was so well done the first time around, and the endless idea that you can have in that sequel and the tension you can build, I think really is something where usually I'm lukewarm on sequels, if not more negative. But this one I'm pretty positive on. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. And I got one of the final points I wanted to bring up here is it has a scene in here that, Hereditary had a scene in there that had my heart racing in the theater. And it was something I was like, I don't think it can be replicated. And I got to say, Talk to Me did that with our character Riley. And there's something in there where you want to tap out and you want to say, no more. And they keep going and they keep going. It has your heart racing. And I'll say, we did get that double punch because I'll disqualify it because I'm saying in the theater, When Evil Lurks has another scene that gets my heart going, but I did see that at home, so I'm going to disqualify it, just my workaround. But yeah, there's a lot of tension in both these films.
Absolutely. So why don't we jump over to the other side of the aisle here and talk about my number one film of the year, which is When Evil Lurks. And yeah, I mean, the reason, my qualifier for why this beats out Talk to Me, I mean, wholly in and of itself is just the fact that this movie genuinely frightened me. It really got under my skin, and it really brought the scares. I don't get scared often. I know I've said it a couple of times this year where films have gotten under my skin and they've creeped me out. There was one specific one that just made me feel dirty and icky after watching it from Fantastic Fest. But this one in particular just hit me in all the correct places. And yes, from what Luke just alluded to, there is a sequence in this, just like the one he said and Talked to Me, that will absolutely have your jaw hit the floor. And you kind of see it coming. Again, it telegraphs itself. But when it happens, it is still utterly shocking. And I can admit that this is not a perfect film. I think that a lot of people have said that there's, some issues with the script. There's some issues with the characters, just as far as them kind of seemingly falling into these scenarios when they could have been avoided. But I guess, don't really hearken or kind of like lean on that too much when it comes to this movie, because everything else is just, again, firing on all cylinders. It adds those punches. It has those scares. And how we just talked about with Talk to Me being such a unique possession film, I absolutely adored the lore for When Evil Lurks and how they tackled possession and how they tackled this universe of how people see what these, infected are like, these monsters, these demons, and how they get into you and what they do to you. By far some of the best and grossest practical effects that you'll see all year round. I mean, there is one character in here who is absolutely grotesque beyond belief. Like, I mean, you can smell him through your TV screen. That's how bad he is. And it's effective in all the right ways for me. And I mean, I think that Damien Rubna just really, again, delivers one of those films that just will forever stick with me as a viewing and will always get under my skin and will be something that I can always see myself going back to and pulling more from.
Yeah, and I think there was maybe some buzz around this by the time we were able to check it out. So, I went into with that hype saying, is this really going to live up to some of the expectation that a lot of people are, kind of putting this on a pedestal. And I got to say, it was right up there. It's something where my number two, but, could easily have been number one. A lot of striking details in terms of the rotten, I think is maybe what they call them.
The rotten.
Even if you haven't seen the film, you've probably seen what we're talking about, because that picture is usually plastered all over, and I think it kind of embodies what this film is. And I know you had talked about some people having issues with the illogical instances of some of the characters and decision making, but it's one of those things where I always look at it as more so a positive, because you're trying to put logic into illogical situations. And one of the things that I do enjoy here is this idea of this kind of lore that's established, that the entire community understands what's going on. There are these kind of rules that you got to play by, but it's one of those things where it's more of a mythical aspect of it, where it's like, I know my second cousin's wife's brother has dealt with the rotten before, and this is how you do it. I could say, hey, we can all know that there are aliens out there, but once you can't do this, but once I'm in contact with it, I'm going to lose all that logic and make illogical decisions. So for me, I always thought these characters are actually in those moments are acting appropriately, because hey, they've never encountered the rotten before, so it's like, what do you do? I just want to kind of execute them, even though I know I'm not supposed to. So I always thought that was a strength of of the film, because it seems more organic as how they would present those ideas, because you just want that aspect out of your life. But this one, there's haunting imagery with an axe. I keep going back with haunting imagery, but there's so much great stuff in here. They're establishing that lore. It's fun to me that we're talking about these unique, fun possession films in a year that the another Exorcist came out, and
Right?
it's not even in the discussion. Where we've been able to take two properties that are just getting started. I mean, who knows? I doubt When Evil Lurks would ever get a sequel, but hey, it's such a strong film. Who knows? Establishing a new set of lore, a new feel to possession films, has me intrigued to see what could be on the horizon in terms of people being inspired to see these films, and what they can come up with. Because you look at, I say possession films have never really hit with me, because I felt like they were all uniform. We haven't seen anything new, anything original. And hey, but this year we got two new, fresh, original possession films. And When Evil Lurks, uh, going back to those practical effects, there's a moment in here where there's just like this sludge, leaking out of our character, and it's just absolutely gross, absolutely disgusting. But you love it in all the best ways, and there's a lot of great gore in this one. And going back to that lore that they establish here, I just absolutely love it. I love playing in that world. I loved being that outsider, and everyone knows these rules you got to play by, and I had no idea. So I'm coming in cold, and we're learning that's like, oh, we're just taking this at face value. This is a thing in our community, and we just have to deal with it. And then the ending, I
Yeah.
talk about a rough one. Ending on horror, they absolutely did that.
Yeah, and it comes in so subtly too at the end there. Just like it's kind of one of those things where you have to really have been paying attention, and it's like one of those, because it's like it'll catch you off guard if you just missed this little detail of what they're alluding to here. And I love that they don't just make the character come right out and say it. They literally just, it's a visual cue, and then it's just, yeah, it ends on horror, absolutely. And yeah, I think that this is definitely my number one of the year. Again, we've said it multiple times. Either of these films could have taken it. We just so happened to flip flop this year, but I mean, both of them are number one number one contenders, I should say, because I think they're both such strong films. And Luke hit it dead on the head when he said that in a year that The Exorcist is rebooted and coming back out, it's not even in the conversation, not even in the same league as these two films. And yeah, that's how we feel about it. And as a whole, that's our top 10. So yeah, coming up on screen now, this is just a screenshot of some letterbox formatted lists that I made. So you guys can see, right out here, our top 10s individually. This was definitely a great year for horror. I mean, this and 2022 were both bang up years. We really picked a great time to, start a horror podcast. But it was so much fun to get to see these and to see so many of them, early, and get you guys these early reviews has been a blessing. Like, I mean, we absolutely love doing this. And yeah, I mean, just celebrating these titles in this video alone makes me want to go back and, rewatch so many of them that we just talked about. And yeah, I really hope that if, you guys haven't seen some of these, that you'll give them a shot, especially this and what's on our honorable mentions. Because again, there are several films that did not even make the cut for that I would love to sit back and discuss even further. And yeah, it was just a great year for horror in general. I mean, we did have some disappointments with things like The Exorcist Believer, but I mean, let's be honest, after Halloween Ends, did we really expect that one to be, a big winner? But then, for every Exorcist Believer, there's an Evil Dead Rise. And then for, every franchise horror movie that doesn't hit, there's original horror movies like Talk to Me. So I got to say that 2023 was another successful year for all the gore hounds, all the horror fanatics. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what's to come in 2024.
And looking at everything across the board from January to December, I got to say 2023 was a bigger win for the horror community than a loss. Some of those legacy properties did not really hit for the community as a whole, and then for me personally. But I got to say, with the uniqueness of things like Skinamarink, the Outwaters, and seeing what you can do on a tinier budget, to Eli Roth creating another classic slasher, and then obviously the uniqueness of Talk to Me and When Evil Lurks, and then Brandon Cronenberg throwing his hat in the ring. A lot of great stuff. Godzilla -1 out there now, really killing it at the box office. So, horror in general is alive and well, and there's the uniqueness, I think, from 2022 to 2023 makes me excited to see how people are going to be inspired, how filmmakers are going to be inspired, how screenwriters are going to be inspired to bring us new and exciting things for 2024, 2025, and beyond that. Because, I think right now we're at that turning point where a lot of people are hungry for horror. It's becoming more accepted than it was, in a killer at the box office. So, we're getting that, those chances to tell those unique stories, and to bring a fresh voice to a tired genre or subgenre in a sense. So I'm definitely excited. I think 2023 was a very positive year. And I can't wait to be sitting here a year from now discussing 2024.
Absolutely. And we will be back, yes, on January 1st, 2025 at midnight to discuss the 2024 films. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. I mean, we got Nosferatu, we've got Maxine to look forward to, among many other things. And yeah, I think that it's going to be hopefully another standout year. I'm real excited to see what these smaller films that we don't know about yet are going to bring to the table, and even some of the ones that we do know are starting to show up at like Sundance and things like that just sound all too enticing. So I'm looking forward to it. If you guys want to drop your list down below, letting us know what your top 10s are for 2023, feel free to do it. We'll definitely comment on them and let you guys know what we think. Were we way off on some of these? Were some of these ones in the honorable mentions list, like me, the fact that I didn't even have Cobweb in my top 10, is that a sin? Is the fact that Luke didn't include Onyx the Fortuitous a sin, or Godzilla? I don't mean, who knows? So, or are we overhyping Talk to Me? Are we overhyping When Evil Lurks? I mean, all opinions. That's the beauty of film. So let us know what you guys think. And yeah, that's gonna wrap that up. And of course, this is the first video of 2024. So if you made it here and you made it to this point, thank you guys so much. And yeah, we're excited to bring you more horror content as the year continues. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.